Some people just don't look like they belong. That's the thought, the little poison that drips into the brain that started it all. It's a quiet sentence, usually left unsaid, but it's loud enough to shatter careers and crumble empires. For one gate agent at JFK, that single, toxic assumption about a black man standing in the first-class line would trigger a countdown, a 45-minute timer she didn't even know was ticking. By the time it hit zero, her life, her manager's career, and the fate of the entire airline would be hanging by a thread, all because she couldn't believe the man in front of her was meant to turn left when boarding the plane. This isn't just a story about karma, it's about the bill always coming due. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was thick with the usual cocktail of anxiety, stale Cinnabon, and floor polish. It was a symphony of controlled chaos, rolling suitcases clicking like giant beetles, disembodied voices announcing final boarding calls, and the weary sighs of travelers who had mentally checked out hours ago. At Gate B42, the pre-boarding announcement for Horizon Wings Flight HW17 to San Francisco had just crackled over the PA system, and the privileged few were beginning to form a neat, self-important line. This was Brenda Hoskins's domain. For 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, the small podium and the jet bridge beyond were her kingdom. Brenda, a woman in her late 40s with hair sprayed into a helmet of improbable stiffness and a name tag that read, Brenda H., Customer Service Supervisor, saw the world in a binary of compliance and complication. Her face was a permanent mask of strained patience, the kind worn by someone who had been asked for a window seat on a full flight one too many times. Today was worse than most. A system glitch had scrambled seat assignments that morning, her coffee was cold, and a passenger on the previous flight had called her a glorified button pusher. So when she looked up at the man now standing before her, the first in the priority Group 1 line, the complication alarm in her head began to blare. The man was tall and impeccably dressed, but not in a way that screamed money, at least not to Brenda's practiced but prejudiced eye. He wore dark tailored trousers, a simple charcoal gray cashmere sweater over a crisp white shirt, and polished leather shoes that probably cost more than her last 2 paychecks combined. But there was no flashy brand logo, no ostentatious gold watch. His only accessory was a slim, elegant briefcase made of rich, dark leather. He was black, his expression was calm, and his posture was relaxed. And in Brenda's tired, resentful mind, the pieces didn't add up. He looked up to her like someone who had mistakenly wandered into the wrong line. His name was Marcus Thorne. At 42, he was the founder and CEO of Airline Technologies, a company that had quietly become the central nervous system for half of the Fortune 500 companies. Airline didn't make phones or apps you'd recognize. They built the invisible, hyper-secure data architecture and AI-driven logistics systems that allowed global corporations to function. Marcus was a ghost in the machine, a billionaire who valued privacy over publicity. He was on his way to San Francisco for the final signing of the largest deal in his company's history, a deal codenamed Project Nightfall. He handed Brenda his boarding pass and passport. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone. Brenda took the documents without making eye contact, her fingers tapping furiously at her keyboard. She scanned the boarding pass. Then she scanned it again. The computer beeped in confirmation. Thorne Marcus, Seat 1A, First Class. She looked from the screen to his face, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. "There seems to be a problem with your ticket, sir." Marcus's calm expression didn't waver. "Oh, I wasn't aware of one. My assistant booked it weeks ago." "The system's been acting up all day," Brenda said, her tone implying the problem was with him, not the computer. She avoided his gaze, instead focusing on her monitor, as if it held the secrets to the universe. "It sometimes generates phantom tickets. It looks like this seat is already assigned." This was a lie, a lazy, amateur lie, but one she'd used before to deal with complications. Behind Marcus, a woman with a spray tan, the color of a traffic cone, and a Louis Vuitton bag clutched to her chest, huffed impatiently. "Is there a problem? Some of us have planes to catch." This was Mrs. Davenport, a woman who believed her husband's dental implant fortune entitled her to a world without inconvenience. Brenda offered the woman a tight, conspiratorial smile before turning back to Marcus. "I'm sure we can find you a spot in the main cabin, sir. We have a middle seat in row 38. The offer was so deliberately insulting that it was almost comical. Marcus allowed a small, wry smile to touch his lips. "I appreciate the offer, Brenda," he said, glancing at her name tag, "but I'll be keeping the seat I paid for. Seat 1A. If your system is down, you can check the flight manifest manually. I'm sure Captain Miller wouldn't want to depart without a confirmed passenger manifest." The use of the pilot's name, a generic guess but a good one, and the calm authority in his voice pricked at Brenda's sense of control. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't making a scene. He was simply standing there radiating an unshakable certainty that was more infuriating than any tantrum. "Sir, I'm telling you, the seat is not available," Brenda snapped, her voice rising. "Now, are you going to accept the seat in coach, or will I have to call security?" Mrs. Davenport gasped theatrically. "Oh, for heaven's sake, just take the seat, young man. You're holding everyone up." Marcus ignored her completely. He held Brenda's gaze. "You will not be calling security, Brenda. You will be doing your job. If you're incapable of that, I'm happy to wait for your supervisor." "I am the supervisor," she retorted, her chest puffing out slightly. It was the ace up her sleeve, the line that usually made people fold. Marcus simply nodded, as if this confirmed a private theory. "I see." He didn't move. He didn't argue further. Instead, he took out his phone, a sleek, minimalist device. With his thumb, he began tapping out a message, his movements economical and precise. He then angled the phone slightly and took a short, discreet video of the gate counter, capturing Brenda's face, her name tag, and the departure screen. This act of quiet documentation sent a bolt of pure rage through Brenda. It was an attack on her authority, a rejection of her power in her little kingdom. "Are you recording me? That's against airline policy," she hissed. "Is racial profiling airline policy too?" Marcus asked, his voice still unnervingly level. "I'm simply documenting a customer service interaction. For the record." The dam of Brenda's professionalism, already cracked and leaking, finally burst. "Security!" she shouted, her voice shrill. "I have a disruptive passenger refusing to comply." Two Port Authority officers, who had been observing from a distance, began to amble over, their expressions conveying a deep and profound boredom. This was just another Tuesday at JFK. But before they could arrive, the door to the jet bridge opened, and a young flight attendant with a kind face and worried eyes poked her head out. "Brenda, is everything okay? Captain Miller wants to know what the holdup is. This man is refusing to accept his seat assignment and is recording me," Brenda announced, pointing an accusatory finger. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Chloe, looked at Marcus, then at Brenda. She saw the first-class boarding pass in Brenda's hand. She saw the calm, intelligent face of the man and the wild, almost frantic look in her colleague's eyes. "Let me see the ticket," Chloe said softly, holding her hand out. Reluctantly, Brenda thrust the paper at her. Chloe looked at it, then typed Marcus's name into the tablet she was holding. A second later, the passenger manifest appeared. She turned the tablet screen to Brenda. There it was in clear, undeniable digital print. 1 Thorne, Marcus. 1A, Seakin, FQTV. He was checked in, and he was a top-tier frequent flyer. Chloe's face went pale. She looked at Marcus with an expression of pure mortification. "Mr. Thorne, my deepest apologies. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Please come right aboard. Your seat is waiting for you." She turned to Brenda, her voice now a low, sharp whisper. "What are you doing, Brenda? The man is confirmed. The captain is going to hear about this." Defeated and humiliated, Brenda stood frozen as Chloe personally escorted Marcus past the podium. Mrs. Davenport huffed again, but even she seemed to recognize a shift in power. As Marcus walked past Brenda, he paused for a fraction of a second. He didn't say a word. He just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a nod of triumph. It was a nod of acknowledgement, a confirmation. The record has been made. He stepped onto the jet bridge and disappeared from her sight. Brenda, her hands trembling slightly, watched the Port Authority officers turn and walk away. chuckling to themselves. The line of first-class passengers began to file past, their faces a mixture of pity and contempt. Her little kingdom was in ruins. She felt a hot flush of shame, but it was quickly replaced by a stubborn, self-righteous anger. He had done this to her. He had embarrassed her. She glanced at the clock on her computer screen. 3:15 p.m. On board the aircraft, Marcus settled into Seat 1A, a spacious pod with its own minibar and entertainment screen. Chloe approached, her face still flushed. "Mr. Thorne, can I get you something to drink before we depart? Champagne? Water? Anything at all? And again, I am so sorry for what happened back there. It was completely unacceptable." "Some sparkling water would be lovely. Thank you, Chloe," Marcus said warmly, giving her a reassuring smile. "And I appreciate that. It's clear you know what good service looks like." As Chloe hurried off to fulfill his request, Marcus took out his phone again. He looked at the text message he had composed but not yet sent. It was to his COO, Isabella Rossi, a woman whose efficiency was the stuff of Silicon Valley legend. The message read, "Isabella, a small incident here at JFK. It requires a strategic response. Please postpone the 4 p.m. call with Richard Sterling at Horizon Wings. Tell them something unavoidable has come up. I'll advise on our next move in exactly 45 minutes. Also, do me a favor. Pull every piece of public and internal data you can find on customer service complaints filed against Horizon Wings in the last 24 months, with a specific focus on discrimination claims at JFK. Project Nightfall may require some new contractual clauses." He pressed send. He looked out the small airplane window as the ground crew began to move away from the aircraft. The clock had started. In the corporate headquarters of Horizon Wings, a world away from Gate B42, the first tremors of an earthquake they didn't know was coming were just beginning, and Brenda Hoskins, back at her podium, nursing her wounded pride, had absolutely no idea that her petty act of prejudice was about to bring the full, terrifying weight of the global economy down upon her and her employer. 50 miles away, in a glass and steel tower that pierced the Manhattan skyline, Richard Sterling, the CEO of Horizon Wings, was sweating through his bespoke Xenia suit. He paced the length of his panoramic corner office, a caged lion surveying a kingdom on the brink of collapse. His airline was bleeding money, fuel costs were soaring, competition from budget carriers was brutal, and their fleet was aging. Their stock had been downgraded twice in the last year. Horizon Wings wasn't just an airline, it was a legacy founded by his grandfather, and Richard was watching it die a slow, agonizing death. Project Nightfall was his Hail Mary, his last-ditch bet-the-farm lifeline. The deal was with AuraSync Technologies, and it was revolutionary. AuraSync would completely overhaul Horizon Wings' digital infrastructure, from a cutting-edge, personalized in-flight entertainment system to an AI-driven logistics network that would optimize fuel consumption, scheduling, and maintenance, saving the airline billions over the next decade. More importantly, the partnership with a tech titan like AuraSync would send a powerful message to Wall Street. Horizon Wings was innovating. It was a survivor. The entire deal hinged on the approval of AuraSync's enigmatic founder, Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a legend in the tech world, precisely because he refused to act like one. He gave no interviews, attended no flashy conferences. He was known for two things: his genius for creating seamless, unbreakable systems, and his ruthless intolerance for inefficiency and incompetence. Getting a meeting with him was hard. Getting his signature was like capturing a unicorn. Today at 4 p.m. sharp, Richard and his executive team were scheduled for the final video conference, the one where Thorne was expected to give his final blessing and commit to the partnership. "Everything is set, Richard," said his chief financial officer, a perpetually worried man named George. "The press release is drafted. The market is anticipating good news. We've mortgaged our future on this." Richard stopped pacing and stared at the large monitor on the wall, which showed a placid waiting screen for the video call. "It's not about the money, George. It's about the man. They say Thorne makes decisions based on gut feelings, on a company's character. He wants partners who embody the same principles as AuraSync: precision, reliability, flawlessness. We're a 70-year-old airline, not a tech startup. We have baggage. Literally, George quipped weakly. He knows that, Richard said, but he needs to believe we're capable of changing, that our culture can evolve to match his technology. At precisely 3:17 p.m., an email chimed on Richard's laptop. It was from Isabella Rossi, Marcus Thorne's COO. Richard's heart leaped. Maybe they were connecting early. He rushed to his desk. His face fell as he read the brief message. Mr. Sterling, due to an unforeseen and unavoidable circumstance, Mr. Thorne will be unable to make the 4 p.m. call. We will be in touch regarding rescheduling at a later time. Regards, Isabella Rossi, COO, Aura Sync Technologies. The silence in the room was deafening. What does it mean? George whispered, his face ashen. Unavoidable circumstance? That's corporate speak for we're backing out. No, Richard said, shaking his head, though a cold dread was creeping up his spine. No, they can't. Not now. The terms were agreed upon. This was a formality. Maybe another company made a better offer. A competitor? Another executive suggested. Panic began to bubble in the pristine, multi-million-dollar office. Richard started composing a frantic, pleading email in his head. He had to save this. He had to know why. Was it the financials? The operational plan? He looked at the clock. 3:20 p.m. The ground had just been ripped out from under him, and he didn't even know why. Meanwhile, 35,000 feet over Pennsylvania, Marcus Thorne had received his sparkling water from Chloe. He had his laptop open on the tray table. The screen wasn't showing spreadsheets or emails. It was displaying a live feed of aggregated data streams. On one side of the screen, news articles, press releases, and stock market analyses related to Horizon Wings populated a scrolling window. On the other, a private dossier Isabella's team was compiling in real time began to fill with information. He saw the company's internal mission statement: to connect the world with reliability, respect, and unparalleled service. He let out a soft, humorless chuckle. A new file appeared in the dossier. It was a link to a folder labeled HW Customer Complaints, JFK. He clicked on it. Inside were dozens of files, each a summary of a formal complaint. He typed Brenda Hoskins into the search bar. The system returned 6 hits in the last 18 months. Complaint number 22-1109. Passenger alleged Supervisor Hoskins was rude and dismissive when asked about wheelchair assistance. Complaint number 23-0341. Family claimed Hoskins accused them of lying about their children's ages to get a cheaper fare, demanding to see birth certificates at the gate. Complaint number 23-0712. Passenger of Middle Eastern descent filed a formal grievance, stating Hoskins repeatedly singled him out for additional security screening questions at the gate, despite him having TSA pre-check. The complaint noted her language was accusatory and prejudiced, and on it went. A clear, documented pattern of a small-minded tyrant wielding her tiny sliver of authority like a cudgel. For each complaint, the resolution was the same. Internal review conducted, employee counseled, case closed. It was a classic corporate whitewash. Identify a problem employee, give them a slap on the wrist in a file nobody ever reads, and wait for them to cause another problem. It was the opposite of a seamless, reliable system. It was a system designed to fail, over and over again. Marcus took a slow sip of his water. This was no longer about a personal insult. This was about character, the character of the company he was about to entrust with his own company's reputation. A company is not its mission statement on the wall. It is the sum of the actions of its people. And the actions of Brenda Hoskins and the inaction of her superiors told him everything he needed to know about the true culture of Horizon Wings. The deal wasn't dead, not yet, but the price had just gone up considerably. Back at gate B42, Brenda was overseeing the boarding of the main cabin. The sting of her humiliation had faded, replaced by a simmering resentment. She had already constructed a narrative in her head where she was the victim. The man had been arrogant. He had provoked her. He was looking for a handout, a lawsuit. She had simply been following procedure in a confusing situation. Her direct manager, a harried man named David Chen, walked up to the podium, his face grim. "Brenda, my office, now." "I'm in the middle of boarding, David," she said, trying to project an air of beleaguered competence. "Boarding can wait. An incident report just came across my desk from Captain Miller of HWU 714. He said you attempted to deny boarding to a confirmed first-class passenger and had to be overruled by his flight attendant. He used the words appalling and unprofessional." "Care to explain?" Brenda felt a chill. Captain's reports were serious. They didn't get filed away and forgotten. "The system was glitchy," she began, launching into her prepared defense. "The ticket seemed fraudulent. The passenger was immediately hostile and began recording me." David held up a hand. "Save it. I'm pulling the security footage from the gate. But let me ask you something, Brenda. Do you have any idea who Marcus Thorne is?" Brenda frowned. "Some frequent flyer, I guess?" He acted like he owned the place. David let out a sound that was half laugh, half groan of despair. "Oh, Brenda, if you only knew. If you only knew." He didn't know the full picture either, but he had been on enough corporate memos to know that when a name from the executive watch list popped up in a captain's complaint, it was a 5-alarm fire. And Brenda had just poured gasoline all over it. The clock on the wall read 3:55 p.m. The 45-minute mark was approaching. The tremors were turning into shock waves, traveling from a gate at JFK to an airplane in the sky, to a corporate office in Manhattan, to a manager's office in the terminal. All the pieces were moving, aligning for a collision that would be heard throughout the entire company. And at the epicenter of it all, a single text message was about to land, turning the chaos into a full-blown catastrophe. As Flight HWU 714 ascended through the cloud layer, breaking into the serene, brilliant blue of the upper atmosphere, a sense of calm settled over the first-class cabin. For Marcus Thorne, this tranquility was not just environmental, it was internal. Anger for him was an inefficient emotion, a burst of static that corrupted clear data. He didn't feel rage at Brenda Hoskins. He felt a profound sense of disappointment, the way an engineer feels when discovering a critical flaw in a supposedly robust design. The human system at Gate B42 had failed its stress test, and now, as was his nature, he had to understand why. He opened his laptop, the screen illuminating his impassive face. On it was a secure portal to Orsink's internal intelligence platform, where Isabella Rossi's team was working with terrifying efficiency. The dossier they were compiling was not just about one disgruntled employee, it was an autopsy of a corporate culture. He scrolled through the data streams, his eyes moving with practiced speed. There was the official data, Horizon Wings stock performance, their declining passenger satisfaction scores, the glossy corporate mission statements promising a journey defined by respect. Then there was the real data, scraped from court filings, customer review aggregators, and leaked internal documents. He saw the complaint from the family accused of lying about their children's ages. He read the sworn statement from the businessman of Middle Eastern descent who was repeatedly and pointedly questioned at the gate by Supervisor Hoskins. He cross-referenced that with a dozen other similar complaints from multiple airports, a clear pattern of behavior either ignored or, worse, implicitly sanctioned by corporate inaction. For Marcus, these weren't just stories. They were data points illustrating a fatal hypocrisy. Horizon Wings wanted to partner with Orasync to build a seamless, intelligent, next-generation travel experience. They wanted his technology to predict maintenance needs, optimize fuel loads, and offer passengers personalized entertainment. Yet they couldn't master the most basic, analog technology of all, treating people with dignity. Their foundation was rotten, and they wanted him to build a skyscraper on top of it. He began to formulate a plan, not of retribution, but of radical, forced renovation. Firing Brenda was a cosmetic fix, like painting over a crack in a collapsing wall. Suing them for discrimination would be a distraction, a protracted legal battle that would enrich lawyers but wouldn't fundamentally change anything. Walking away from the deal was tempting, but it felt like a dereliction of duty. When you are one of the few people with the power to force a necessary change, walking away is a form of complicity. He would not just punish them for their failure, he would make them the unwilling architects of their own redemption. He began composing a new detailed message for Isabella, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. Isabella, the initial assessment reveals a systemic cultural failure at Horizon Wings, not an isolated incident. Standard punitive measures are insufficient. We will therefore pivot our strategy for Project Nightfall. The goal is no longer partnership, it is restructuring. Draft the following contractual amendments immediately. 1. Create a new binding addendum, the Human Systems Integration Protocol. This will grant AuraSync non-negotiable oversight of a complete overhaul of HW's customer-facing training and policies. We will embed an audit team at their primary hubs for a minimum of 24 months. Their findings will be binding. All HW employees, from CEO Sterling down to ramp agents, will be required to complete our new certification program. 2. Create a second addendum, the Horizon Wings Opportunity Fund. This clause will redirect 15% of the gross value of the initial technology contract into a protected fund. This fund will not be managed by HW. We will appoint a third-party DEI consultancy to administer it for the sole purpose of creating scholarships, mentorship programs, and executive track opportunities for underrepresented employees within their company. They will fix their pipeline problem with their own money. 3. Finally, initiate contact. Send a single formal email to Richard Sterling. Do not apologize for the cancellation or offer any explanation. The email will contain one request only. Pursuant to our ongoing due diligence for Project Nightfall, please provide the complete and unredacted personnel file, including all commendations, disciplinary actions, and passenger complaints. For employee Brenda Hoskins, employee ID Reader 732, JFK International Airport. This should be sufficient to command his full attention. I will handle direct contact upon landing. We are no longer asking for a seat at their table, is he? We are rebuilding the table. He hit send and closed the laptop. The plan now in motion. He took a sip of his water and gazed out the window, a quiet sense of purpose settling over him. The collision was now inevitable. 50 miles away, the atmosphere in the Horizon Wings boardroom was anything but calm. The cancellation email from Isabella Rossi had landed like a bomb, and the shrapnel of panic was flying. "What does it mean, unavoidable circumstance?" screamed a VP of marketing named Jessica. "That's what you say when your car breaks down, not when you're closing a 10-figure deal. They're dumping us. Someone else made a better offer. It must be Delta. I heard they were sniffing around AuraSync." "It's our debt load," George, the CFO, moaned, wiping sweat from his brow. "They ran the final numbers and realized we're too much of a risk. We're insolvent, Richard. They saw it." Richard Sterling stood frozen, his mind a maelstrom of horrific possibilities. He felt a primal urge to act, to do something to stop the bleeding. He began furiously typing a reply on his laptop, a desperate, pleading message that reeked of weakness. "Isabella, my deepest apologies for any inconvenience. We are, of course, flexible. Please, just tell us what is wrong." Before he could hit send, a new email notification pinged. The sender was Isabella Rossi. A wave of relief washed over Richard. An explanation, an apology, a reschedule. He clicked it open. He stared at the screen, his mouth falling open. The relief vanished, replaced by a profound and chilling confusion. He read the message aloud, his voice barely a whisper. "She wants the complete and unredacted personnel file for employee Brenda Hoskins, employee ID 7432, JFK International Airport." The room fell silent. The executives looked at each other, their faces a gallery of bafflement. "Who?" Jessica, the marketing VP, asked. "Who the hell is Brenda Hoskins?" "An employee? A gate agent?" George sputtered. "Why? Is this a test? Some kind of bizarre HR security audit to see if we protect our employees' privacy?" "No," Richard said, his mind beginning to churn. "This is specific. They have her name. They have her employee number. This isn't a test. This is an accusation." His heart hammered in his chest. A million possibilities bloomed and died in his mind. Was she a whistleblower who had contacted AuraSync? Did she have a relative on their board? Was she involved in some criminal activity at the airport that they had uncovered? The not knowing was the worst part. It was a single, impossibly specific clue in a mystery he couldn't begin to solve. He grabbed his desk phone. his hand trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. "Get me Frank Miller, VP of East Coast Operations, on the line now," he yelled at his assistant. "Then get our head of HR. I want to know everything there is to know about a gate agent at JFK named Brenda Hoskins, and I want to know it 10 minutes ago." The panic began its cascade down the corporate food chain. Frank Miller, enjoying a steak lunch, nearly choked when he got the call from his hysterical CEO. He immediately called his director of airport operations, who in turn called the JFK terminal manager. The terminal manager, a man on the verge of retirement, felt a sudden, sharp pain in his chest as he frantically searched for the on-duty manager. That manager was David Chen. David was in his cramped office, reviewing landing schedules, when his phone buzzed with a call from the terminal manager. The tone of his boss's voice, high-pitched and frantic, immediately put him on high alert. "David, I need a name. Brenda Hoskins. Is she on duty?" "Yes," David said. "She's working the gate for HW714 to San Francisco." "Why? What's going on?" "I don't know," his boss shrieked. "The call came from the top, Sterling himself. They want her jacket. Now, pull every file you have on her." Before David could even process the request, another call came in. This one an automated alert from the flight deck of HW714. It was a formal incident report filed by the captain, logged directly into the system. His blood ran cold as he read the summary. Supervisory Gate Agent B. Hoskins attempted to deny boarding to confirm first-class passenger, exhibited unprofessional and hostile behavior, was overruled by flight crew to prevent further delay and passenger distress. He stared at the screen, a sick feeling growing in the pit of his stomach. A gate incident, a direct call from the CEO, a request for her file from their potential multi-billion-dollar partner. The pieces were starting to connect in a truly horrifying way. He pulled up the flight manifest for HW714 and scanned the first-class list. And then he saw it. Seat 1A, Thorne, Marcus. David Chen felt the world tilt on its axis. He had seen the name on dozens of high-priority internal memos about Project Nightfall. He knew exactly who Marcus Thorne was, and he knew that Brenda Hoskins, with her petty tyrannies and her sour disposition, had just casually pointed a loaded gun at the heart of the entire company and pulled the trigger. He walked out of his office, the captain's report on his tablet, and headed toward Gate B42. He found Brenda basking in the sullen, self-righteous afterglow of having put the main cabin passengers in their place. "Brenda, my office," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm busy, David," she snapped, not looking at him. "My office. Now," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. In the sterile confines of his office, she immediately launched into her pre-rehearsed defense. "It's about that man, isn't it? He was arrogant. He was recording me. He was clearly looking for a lawsuit." David held up a hand, cutting her off. "Brenda, just stop. I've read the captain's report. But that's the least of our problems. I need you to tell me exactly what you said to the man in seat 1A. "I told him the seat was taken. I offered him a spot in coach, which was more than he deserved," she insisted. David sank into his chair, a wave of despair washing over him. "The man you offered a middle seat in row 38, Brenda. His name is Marcus Thorne." The name landed with a thud, but it produced no recognition. "So what? He thinks his fancy name gets him special treatment?" David looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the sheer oblivious depth of the catastrophe she had caused. "Brenda," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "Orasync Technologies is the company that is about to sign a deal to save this airline from bankruptcy. Project Nightfall. It's the only thing keeping us from laying off 10,000 people before Christmas. And Marcus Thorne is its founder and CEO. He wasn't looking for special treatment. He was the man our CEO has been courting for a year. He was flying to San Francisco to sign the final papers that would secure the future of this entire company. Your company, my company." The smug defiance on Brenda's face finally crumbled, replaced by a wave of sickening, horrified understanding. Her memory flashed back to the man's unnerving calm, his quiet confidence, his complete lack of fear. He hadn't been acting arrogant. He had been acting from a position of power so far beyond her comprehension that she couldn't even recognize it. Her small, bitter world of gate assignments and boarding groups had just collided with the global economy, and she was at ground zero. 5 hours later, Flight HW712 began its descent into San Francisco. On the ground, Richard Sterling and his team had endured an agony of suspense, having confirmed the connection between the incident and their mystery man. The only thing left to do was wait. When the plane touched down, Richard's phone was already in his hand, Marcus Thorne's number pre-dialed. The moment the flight status switched to landed, he hit the call button. It rang and rang and rang, each ring a turn of the screw in his tightening gut. It went to voicemail. Marcus, meanwhile, ignored the vibration in his pocket. He waited patiently for the jet bridge to connect. He gave a warm, genuine smile to Chloe as he deplaned. "Thank you for a wonderful flight, Chloe. You're a credit to this airline." He walked calmly through the terminal, a man without a care in the world, and slipped into the back of a waiting town car. Only when the car was pulling away from the curb, cocooned in silence and tinted glass, did he answer the second frantic call from Richard Sterling. "Mr. Thorne, Marcus, thank God." Richard's voice was a torrent of panicked relief. "I cannot begin to express how sorry. There are no words to describe the professional and personal shame I feel. The employee responsible has been suspended. She will be terminated. I give you my personal guarantee. It's unforgivable. We will do anything to make it right." A long, calculated silence stretched from Marcus's end of the line. He watched the lights of the Bay Bridge slide past his window. "Your guarantee is worthless to me right now, Richard," Marcus said finally, his voice devoid of any emotion. It was far more terrifying than if he had been screaming. "And firing her is a simplistic solution to a complex problem. It's the answer I'd expect from a company that doesn't understand the nature of its own systems." Richard's breath hitched. "The issue is not one employee," Marcus continued, his tone clinical, as if describing a failed experiment. "The issue is a culture of negligence that allowed her to operate with impunity. You have a systemic failure, Richard. Therefore, the partnership we discussed, the one based on your current operational reality, is no longer viable. The deal we discussed this morning is off the table." The words hit Richard Sterling like a physical blow. He choked back a sob. "Marcus, please. You can't. It will destroy us." "I am aware of the potential consequences," Marcus said calmly. "However, that does not mean a deal is impossible. It simply means the terms have changed. A new deal is now on the table. My COO has just forwarded you the revised proposal. I suggest you read it very carefully with your board. It outlines the only path forward for a future partnership between our companies. Call me when you've understood what is now required of you." He hung up the phone, leaving Richard Sterling in a state of stunned, horrified silence, staring at the new email that had just appeared on his screen, its subject line a harbinger of the revolution to come. The digital document glowed on Richard Sterling's monitor, an illuminated manuscript of his own damnation. He and his CFO, George, sat in the silent boardroom, the 60th floor view of Manhattan's glittering expanse, feeling less like a conquest and more like the height from which they were about to be thrown. Richard had read the amendment, titled Human Systems Integration Protocol, 4 times. Each pass peeled back another layer of Marcus Thorne's cold, brilliant, and utterly ruthless strategy. This wasn't a contract. It was a hostile takeover of their corporate identity. "He can't be serious," George whispered, his voice hoarse. He gestured at the screen with a trembling finger. "Oversight? Mandatory audits by his people? Unilateral power to rewrite our training manuals? This is tantamount to surrendering. Our board will never agree to this. It's an admission of incompetence. It's an admission of fact, George." Richard snapped back, the words tasting like ash. "And that's why we have no choice. Do you not see what he's done? He's put us in a cage." Richard stood and began to pace, his mind finally grasping the terrifying elegance of the trap. "If we refuse these terms, the deal is dead. But it won't be a quiet death. The story will leak. Not from him, that's not his style. It will leak from a dozen different places, a disgruntled board member, a panicked VP, a journalist who gets a whiff of why the biggest deal in our history collapsed overnight. And what will the story be? That Horizon Wings lost a multi-billion-dollar partnership because one of our supervisors engaged in blatant racial profiling against the CEO of the partner company. That we have a documented history of ignoring such complaints. Our stock won't just fall, it will be delisted. We'll be a case study in corporate malfeasance. We'll be finished. He stopped and looked at George. Option A is ruin. Public, humiliating ruin. And option B is this, George countered, gesturing again at the screen. This opportunity fund, redirecting $100 million of our capital into a scholarship fund managed by his handpicked consultants. It makes us look weak, like we have to be forced to do the right thing. We are weak, and we are being forced to do the right thing, Richard roared, slamming his hand on the polished mahogany table. The sound echoed in the cavernous room. That's the entire point. Thorne doesn't want our money. He wants our repentance, and he wants it to be public, binding, and contractual. He's not punishing us, he's fixing us, and he's making us pay for the repairs. The most chilling part, the part that kept looping in Richard's mind, was the unspoken clause about Brenda Hoskins. His initial panicked reaction had been to offer her head on a platter. Fire her, ruin her, make her a scapegoat. That's how corporate America worked. You find the bad apple, you throw it out, you issue a press release, and you move on. But Thorne had refused the sacrifice. He doesn't want her fired, Richard said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Think about that, George. He's leaving the problem employee inside the system. Why? Because firing her is easy. It lets us off the hook. It allows us to pretend she was the disease. He knows she's just a symptom. He's leaving her in because he's going to make her the cure. He's going to force the system to heal itself from the inside out, starting with its most infected cell. It's diabolical. There was no more debate. The choice was clear: annihilation or subjugation. An emergency board meeting was convened via video conference. Richard, pale and grim, laid out the terms and the stark reality of their situation. There was outrage, denial, and sputtering indignation from a few of the older board members. But when the legal counsel soberly confirmed Richard's analysis, that refusing the deal would trigger an unstoppable reputational and financial collapse, the fight went out of them. One by one, they voted aye. It was the sound of a kingdom surrendering its sovereignty to save its own life. A formal acceptance, drafted by a team of humbled lawyers, was sent to Isabella Rossi's office before the sun set. The next morning, David Chen summoned Brenda Hoskins to his office. She had spent the last 36 hours in a purgatory of her own making, replaying the encounter at the gate, her mind a frantic blur of self-justification and nauseating fear. She walked into his office prepared for the guillotine, to be fired, to lose her pension, to become a pariah in the industry. She looked smaller, her helmet of hair seemed to have lost its structural integrity, and her face was a sallow gray. "Just get it over with, David," she said, sinking into the visitor's chair without being asked. David leaned back, steepling his fingers. He looked at the woman before him, a colleague for over a decade, and felt a bizarre cocktail of pity and professional obligation. "Brenda, I've received the final directive from corporate regarding your situation. You're not being terminated." A single shaky breath of relief escaped Brenda's lips. It was a premature celebration. "Your current role as customer service supervisor is being dissolved. Effective immediately," David continued, reading from his screen in a flat monotone. "You are being reassigned." "To where?" she asked, the hope in her voice fragile. "Cargo? Lost and found? I'll do anything." David took a slow, deliberate breath, as if bracing for impact. "You've been appointed to a newly created position. You are now the interim co-lead for the JFK branch of the Human Systems Integration Task Force." Brenda's face contorted in confusion. The title was a meaningless string of corporate jargon to her. "The what? I don't understand. What is that?" "It's the operational arm of our new partnership with OrSync Technologies," David explained, choosing his words carefully. "It's a top-down initiative to rebuild our entire customer interaction model. Your job, Brenda, will be to work directly alongside an executive auditor from OrSync. Your primary function will be to help them analyze our existing protocols to identify, and I quote, Points of cultural and procedural failure. He paused, letting the words sink in. You'll be participating in and then facilitating mandatory anti-bias and de-escalation workshops for all JFK staff. You will sit in on moderated focus groups with employees and passengers who have filed grievances. You will be required to give a weekly progress report to your co-lead, who in turn reports directly to the office of Marcus Thorne. The room was silent. Brenda stared at him, her mouth slightly agape, as the full, horrifying scope of her fate dawned on her. This wasn't a reprieve. It was a life sentence in a prison of her own making. He was asking her to become a priestess for a religion she didn't believe in, to be the public face of everything she secretly despised. No, she whispered. That's a joke. You're firing me, and this is some kind of sick joke. I assure you, Brenda, no one at corporate is joking right now, David said tiredly. This directive came from the CEO's office. It's not a request. This is your new job. Accept it or tender your resignation. But why me? She finally stammered, the question filled with genuine, desperate bewilderment. Because Brenda, David said, finally meeting her eyes with a look of grim finality, they believe that the person who best understands a sickness is the one to lead the search for the cure. You know every shortcut, every excuse, every way to bend a rule to justify a prejudice. Now you're going to teach everyone else how to spot them. Her hard karma had arrived. It wasn't the swift, clean execution of being fired. It was the slow, methodical, and public torture of forced enlightenment. She would not be allowed to forget her transgression. Instead, she would be forced to study it, dissect it, and preach against it, all under the watchful eye of the man she had wronged. The implementation began almost immediately. Cold, formal memos announced the sweeping changes. The atmosphere at Horizon Wing's JFK terminal became thick with rumor and dread. Then the Orasync team arrived. They were young, sharp, and moved with a quiet confidence that was deeply unnerving to the established staff. Brenda's co-lead was a woman named Anya Sharma, a Harvard MBA with eyes that seemed to see right through every excuse. Their first meeting was a masterclass in tension. Brenda, sullen and resentful, sat opposite Anya in a sterile conference room. Anya didn't threaten or condescend. She simply started asking questions. Walk me through the procedure for a suspected fraudulent ticket, Brenda. What are the official steps? Now, what are the unofficial steps? What does supervisory discretion really mean on the floor? Days turned into weeks. Brenda was forced to sit through hours of training that felt like personal attacks, listening to actors role-play scenarios that were eerily similar to her encounter with Marcus Thorne. Then, she had to stand before her former subordinates and colleagues, her voice hollow, and facilitate those same workshops. The first time someone in the class used an excuse she herself had used 100 times. You just get a feeling about some people. She found herself snapping back with a ferocity that surprised even her. That feeling is not part of the protocol, she heard herself say, her words echoing David Chen's. It was a horrifying moment of out-of-body clarity. Months later, in his penthouse office overlooking the San Francisco Bay, Marcus Thorne was reviewing the latest quarterly report from the Integration Task Force. Isabella Rossi stood beside him, pointing to a series of charts on a large monitor. It's working, Isabella said. It's slow and it's painful, but it's working. Customer complaints regarding discriminatory practices at JFK are down 35%. Employee satisfaction in the new training is, surprisingly, trending positive after initial resistance. And here's the kicker. She swiped the screen to a new page. It was a transcript from a recent focus group where an employee complained that the new rules were too restrictive. The transcript showed the response from the facilitator, Brenda Hoskins. Brenda H. The system isn't there to give you an excuse to act on a bias. It's there to protect you from your own worst instincts. It's there to protect the passenger. Most importantly, it's there to protect the company. Follow the protocol. It's the only thing that keeps us from chaos. Marcus read the quote, and a slow, thoughtful smile touched his lips. It was more than he could have ever hoped for. He hadn't just made a point. He had forced a change in perspective, born from the crucible of her own personal humiliation. Revenge is a fire that burns itself out, Izzy, he said, turning from the monitor to look out at the endless, complex grid of the city. But a re-engineered system? That can last. We could have taken their money, sued them, and walked away with a trophy. But what would that have changed for the next person in line? Nothing. Power isn't about winning a fight. It's about having the ability to rewrite the rules of the game so the fight never has to happen again. He hadn't just taken her job or her pride. He had taken her worldview, shattered it into a million pieces, and handed her the exhausting, lifelong task of putting it back together in a better shape. It was a reckoning that would never truly be over, a karma that wasn't a destination, but a relentless, transformative journey. And that's the real power in this story. It's not just about one man getting justice. It's about how true influence isn't about shouting the loudest, but about understanding the system better than your opponent. Marcus Thorne didn't just demand respect. He leveraged his position to fundamentally change the culture that denied it to him. He turned a moment of personal humiliation into a catalyst for systemic reform. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most devastating karma isn't about revenge, but about responsibility, forcing someone to fix the very problem they created. What did you think of Brenda's fate? Was it more or less effective than simply getting her fired? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of epic karma and corporate chess, make sure to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more stories where the bill always comes due. Thanks for watching.